time to get started. We'd like to welcome everyone to our December edition of the MasterDrive colloquium. It's hard to believe that we've reached the end of 2021 and it's been a year, and I'm quite sure some of us will agree that it's literally flown by. Just some of the highlights for the year. We know that for the first time, fuel hit a high level of 20 Rand a litre. And we trust that we will take cognizance of that as we move forward. And of course, there's a couple of other things that were introduced during the course of the year. Without going into too much detail, one of the things was the guidelines, the published guidelines on the right to repair. And we know that there's been many misconceptions about it. So we have the CEO of Right to Repair, Kate Elliot, that will be talking to us a little bit later on the subject. But we also know that through the year, there have been many other challenges. And what we would like to do is end the year, even though we know that should be a time when everybody should be looking forward to a rest, recreation, and a reprieve, there are stresses that will go with it. And we've got Janine Fourie who will talk us through how we can develop some coping mechanisms to deal with the stresses at this time and as we finish off the year. And then, of course, we would like to look at the DNA of an accident. Craig is here again with us. And we'd like to see what we could or should be doing to not be one of those statistics that we find during the festive season. Security services, of course, we leave our homes. What should we do to make sure that those possessions are protected? Because, as you know, criminals don't take leave in December. In fact, the activities proliferate. So would like you to just reflect on the following. We choose our guests very carefully. And the guests that participate here, and I trust it's true of those who are visiting with us and joining the colloquium, to demonstrate the energy that we at MasterDrive share in everything we do. And I think it's a fitting time, given the fact that we're in the middle of the 16 days of activism against violence, women and children. There's a quote I'd like to share with you. It is from Maya Angelou, who was an American poet, human rights activist, and a number of other things. And she said the following. So just before I introduced Kate Elliot, reflect on this, please. The best part of life is not just surviving, but thriving with passion and compassion and humor.
Sorry, Eugene, you muted.
You may have to read that again. You were muted.
Hey, why didn't you tell me that? All right. Sorry. Okay, guys, just a very brief introduction. The colloquium, the final colloquium for 2021, as dealing with thriving and thriving during the festive season. It's been a challenging year for every one of us, no doubt. And we've had to deal with stresses and pressures that we've never addressed in the past. So how do we do this? One of our guest speakers today is going to be Janine Fourie, that's going to be talking about giving us coping mechanisms. Significant events in 2021, fuel, 20 Rand a litre. The published guidelines for right to repair. How do we deal with some of the challenges and the misconceptions? Kate, CEO of Right to Repair, will be talking to us. We also know that there's many crashes and accidents. Craig will be talking to the DNA of a crash. What do we do today to address those problems? And he's going to unpack that. And also, let's not forget that the criminals don't take leave during December. So what do we do to protect our homes while we may be away? We at MasterDrive share incredible energy, and we choose our guests who share this platform with us on a similar basis. And given the fact that we're in the middle of the 16 days of activism against violence, women and children, there's a quote from a human rights activist in the States, Maya Angelou, also a poet and author. And I think the thought best expresses the way we'd like to introduce this colloquium. The best part of life is not just surviving, but thriving with passion and compassion and humor and style and generosity and kindness. And it is in that spirit that we'd like to introduce our first speaker, Kate, who will be talking to us about the misconceptions on the right to repair.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you to Eugene and MasterDrive for having me. It's very exciting to be here. I am going to just share my screen, so just give me a second. I just need to go onto it. Let's close that. That's it. Sorry, starting halfway through. Right, so as you've heard, my name is Kate Elliot, and I am the CEO of Right to Repair South Africa. Right to Repair South Africa is a non-profit organization, and our goal is to ensure fair competition in the automotive aftermarket. For the last few years, we have been campaigning for these guidelines for competition in the automotive aftermarket to be published. And so we participated in the drafting process between 2017 and 2020. They were published in December 2021, and we are very happy that they finally come into effect on the 1st of July 2021. Our goal has now moved to promoting these guidelines and ensuring compliance. So what is the overall purpose of the guidelines? Why do we have them? One would think a capitalist society, the best business is the one that's going to succeed. Yes.
Your presentation is not on screen.
Okay,
yeah,
no, thank you.
Take a moment.
I did share screen. So let me just exit this. Sorry about that, everybody. Share screen.
At least I'm not the only one that's making a faux pas today.
No, that's great. Sorry, let me just find it because I've got it on my screen. I normally work in Teams, so I apologize for this. Am I sharing now?
Hold on a sec. No, I'm seeing a Zoom thing.
Okay, so let me just go to the right thing. I'm just moving this thing out the way. There we go. Okay, let me just present again. Sorry, I thought I clicked on it. So I was just giving you the background, but that's not too exciting. Let me just move this out the way now. There we go. That should be a little bit better. Is that better? Right, so let's go to, I don't know how to make this disappear. Okay, let me just move it out the way. That's better. Okay. So the purpose of the guidelines, as I said, in a perfect capitalist society, the best business will be the business that succeeds. But over time, large businesses have been able to create mechanisms to trap business. And that is where the Competition Act comes in, so that we can ensure that the best practice, that the best business, is the one that succeeds. Just moving this out the way. So let's get into the guidelines then. The main, one of the main sections of the guidelines means that you have the freedom to choose your service provider. You're entitled to choose where you service your vehicle, both in the warranty period and after. So that's something that is changed, in that the manufacturers were previously not allowing you to have your vehicle serviced outside of their dealership network while the car was still in warranty. But very importantly, tied into this is that your warranty is protected if you choose to now go outside of the dealer network. You're entitled to choose any independent service provider, but it is very important to note that you must choose your service providers carefully. The independent service provider still needs to ensure that they follow manufacturer guidelines when doing the service on your vehicle. And they have to have the correct insurance in place so that if something does actually go wrong and they do the wrong thing and a section of your warranty ends up being voided, that you are still covered. So I do urge everyone to make use of the guidelines. It's fantastic. It's wonderful, but you must ensure that you do your homework when choosing your service provider. In order to facilitate this, to allow you to use an independent service provider, another section of the guidelines has stated that the manufacturers must sell you a service plan or maintenance plan separately to a vehicle. And if you don't want to purchase it, you don't have to purchase it. They have to provide you with separate prices for the service plan and separate price for the vehicle. Part of that is that they must also give you a breakdown of what the service is going to include. You know, what is the average price of a service? What is the average price of the parts that would be included in a maintenance plan? This allows you to really see whether it is actually beneficial to you or not to have the service done or not, to whether to purchase the service plan or not. It is also possible to buy a service plan from someone other than your manufacturer. It may come up that businesses start to sell these sorts of things, and so it's just opened up the market completely in this regard. You are now also entitled to use matching quality parts or original parts in your vehicle. You must obviously use good quality non-original parts and not grade parts. And if there is any damage to your vehicle as a result of using a matching quality part, there is a risk, like using an independent service provider, that a section of your warranty might be voided as a result if that part causes a problem. So those are the main sections of the guidelines. Something that I get asked a lot of the time is, well, how enforceable are these guidelines? Are they just guidelines? Are they a recommendation? Do you have to follow them? So the guidelines were published by the Competition Commission, and they are based as an interpretation of the Competition Act and how the Competition Act applies to this particular industry. And so while as a standalone document, they aren't enforceable, they are enforceable if you take them into consideration with the Competition Act. And where sections are very, very clear and directive in their nature, you would be very ill-advised to not comply. This is obviously more of a message to those who are in the industry, but it's good to know as a consumer that the manufacturers are actually obliged to comply with it. So something that's good to know as a consumer so that you can have peace of mind is, what do I do if an OEM has actually declined my warranty? So I've gone to an independent service provider, or I've used a non-original part. What now? So now something's gone wrong. You take your vehicle to the OEM when you think it's a suspected warranty fault, and the manufacturer must at its own cost conduct an assessment of the vehicle and fault to ascertain the cause of the failure. If the failure is a factory fault, the OEM is obliged to honor the warranty. If the OEM declines your warranty without a valid basis, your options are to contact the Motor Industry Ombudsman, approach an attorney to take legal action, or if the basis on which the OEM is refusing to honor your warranty relates to any of the provisions of the guidelines, you can lay a complaint with the Competition Commission. If the OEM is able to provide evidence that the failure can be attributed to the ISP or to a part that's been used, then it will be for the ISP then you're entitled to lay a claim against any party in the supply chain. So that's in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. So you can go to the ISP who put the part in, you can go to the supplier or the manufacturer of that part. Or if it's something that the ISP did wrong, then obviously you're going to go to the independent service provider. So let's get into some of the common misconceptions. A lot of people seem to think that they can purchase a service plan and then take their vehicle to an independent service provider and claim the money for that service back from the manufacturer. That's unfortunately not the case. your right to choose comes at the point of making the decision of whether to purchase the service plan or not. Once you've chosen to purchase that service plan, once you've done your homework, because they're supposed to give you the whole breakdown of what it includes, then you must take your vehicle to the service provider indicated in that contract. If you're really fed up with your dealer, that they're really doing a terrible job, you could actually still take your vehicle to an independent service provider and have it serviced there, but you would effectively be paying double. You'd have to pay the service provider for that, and you would lose the value that you've paid in your service plan. But there are some people who do get so fed up that they do that anyway. So another thing that has come up, but won't really be in effect in the future, but is very applicable to people now, is that if you've purchased a vehicle before the 1st of July 2021 and it is still under warranty, these guidelines do apply. It's not only applicable to vehicles that have been purchased after the 1st of July 2021. So that's just important to note. So if any of you are driving a vehicle that's still under warranty and you bought it earlier in the year or last year or even the year before, you are still entitled to make use of these guidelines and choose which service provider you'd like to use. This is also something that comes up quite a lot, that people think, if I'm going to fit a non-original tow bar and something goes wrong with the engine, that the manufacturers are going to say, oh no, well, you took your vehicle to have some non-original part fitted and we're just going to void your warranty. That is not allowed. There has to be a causal link. There has to be a cause and effect, that the tow bar, say you put a non-original tow bar in and it affects something around the tow bar, or it affects maybe some wiring or something, then that could be a reason to void that section of your warranty. But you can't blame just the fact that you put a tow bar in on something that obviously has no link to it. There's no official list of approved parts. So I said, you have to use a good, reputable brand. So you have to, once more, choose your independent service provider carefully and let them guide you as to what a good non-original part would be. So that's it from me. And these are my contact details. If any of you have any questions in the future, or you have concerns about the guidelines, or you've taken your vehicle in and the dealer's given you problems, or an independent service provider is giving you problems in terms of the guidelines, please feel free to contact me. So thank you, Eugene.
Kate, thank you very much. I've got a few questions already that we'll field in Q&A. And if anybody would like to send through, please put it into the chat box. I was just wondering, do you think there'll be a warranty at any point for the nut behind the wheel? Okay, on that thought, thank you very much, Kate. Please stay around and I'm sure we can get some decent questions already. I've got 3 for you. So thank you very much. We're now going to move through to Justin Manson, who's the sales director for Webfleet Solutions. I indicated earlier, and maybe we missed it on my faux pas, how often does an original equipment supplier, in this case a tire manufacturer, Bridgestone, get behind a mobility solution? And we've got Justin, who will be talking to us today about the total mobility solution. Thank you very much, Justin.
Thanks, Eugene. Let me just share the screen quickly. Sorry, also having an issue trying to share my screen. Sorry. Don't know what it's not working.
If needs be, we can get Nishani to put on your screen for us.
There we go. Sorry, my bad. Everything except for what I wanted it to share.
Okay, we can't, there we are.
Yeah. Are you guys seeing full screen mode or are you seeing in presenter mode?
Put it into presenter mode. Or full screen, all right.
Are you seeing full screen now or presenter?
That's perfect.
Awesome. So yeah, Eugene, thank you very much for the opportunity and the MasterDrive team. Thanks for the opportunity to join you guys and to share some of our thoughts around total mobility. Some of the points I'd like to touch on is first of all, what is total mobility? I think, different industries or different verticals, mobility means different things. And I'm not talking about verticals within the transport space. I'm talking about industries, tech industries. Mobility means very different, or is something very different to the finance industry, as an example, which is very different to the transport industry. So I'll touch on a couple of things around what mobility means in the transport space. Then I will talk a little bit about what is mobility, but I'm going to explain it through numbers and an elephant. I mean, if you're explaining things, you have to have an elephant somewhere on the way. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk about the platform. Mobility in the transport space is very dependent on tech and very dependent on proper platforms. And I'll just touch a little bit on the Webfleet platform and total mobility solutions. Not necessarily just the Webfleet platform, but what businesses in the fleet space should be considering and should be taking into account when they're looking at moving into this total mobility sort of environment. So to start off with, first of all, what is total mobility? There's various different things, various different factors that contribute towards total mobility. And these points that I've got listed here are just a few of them that we need to consider when it comes to total mobility in the fleet or in the transport space. And each of them are interlinked or integrated in some way or other. And I'll kind of explain that as we go along. So, it's things like modeling of transportation services and transportation simulation tools. So things like taking into account historic traffic data, taking into account real-time traffic data so that you can simulate certain different scenarios around urban driving, as an example. How do we ensure that we the roads aren't congested during peak times, or we spread that congestion over different periods. Integration of innovative mobility services like shared mobility or mobility as a service, which is something new, a new buzzword which has been thrown around at the moment. So mobility services or shared mobility, things like your e-hailing services, car sharing, which is not a very big thing in South Africa, but how do we integrate those sort of things into your transport simulation tools or your transport services? Urban and last mile logistics services. Once again, what is the best time to be sending those last mile logistics services into urban areas or on congested routes, the main routes? How do we spread that flow of traffic as much as we possibly can? Innovative traffic management systems. This talks very much to your smart city platforms, and it talks to the next point, which is your big data analytics for transportation and the machine learning around that. So it's taking the data from various different points into a platform and then being able to learn from that. So play out real-time scenarios, which you can then use to change, as an example, the sequence of the traffic lights. So learning from different peak times, historic data that we've got, change the sequence of the traffic lights to spread out the flow of traffic a little bit better, and keep vehicles in motion, essentially. Smart city platforms I spoke a little bit about when we were talking about the shared mobility. Out of vehicle mobility solutions. So if you've got a mobile workforce, how are you enabling that mobile workforce to be able to operate correctly outside of the vehicle? Are they being productive? Are they being efficient? You can monitor them quite easily while they're actually in the vehicle. But what is happening when they're outside of the vehicle? Can you still monitor the productivity and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? And then something which is quite important, and it's something I'm kind of getting involved in more and more at the moment. Certainly with MasterDrive and one or two other sort of people I've got in touch with recently, is around driver well-being and driver health analytics. We've got all these different tools and different data sets and telemetry data which can help us to monitor the diagnostics of the vehicle, or analyze what's happening with the vehicle, et cetera, but are we actually taking into account the driver, and are we taking into account the well-being and the health of the driver? And I'll touch on that a little bit more a little bit later in the presentation. Okay, so to explain total mobility, I'm going to use a couple of numbers, and as I said, the elephant, out of a discipline which probably takes mobility to the next level. I think it's this particular discipline uses telemetry data like no other industry or no other discipline. So let's jump straight into it. So the first couple of numbers, 100 to 145, 1,000 degrees Celsius, 1,600 kilograms, and 65 liters per 100 kilometers. So what do these numbers mean? The first one is 100 to 145 degrees Celsius is the optimal operating temperature for an F1 vehicle's tires, depending on the compound. 1,000 degrees Celsius, that is the temperature, the temperature that brakes will reach when the F1 vehicle is braking. Going into a corner, they'll start off at about 400 degrees Celsius. As they come out of the corner, they could be seeing as high as 1,000 degrees Celsius. 1,600 kilograms, that is the amount of downforce that an F1 vehicle generates, which technically means that at full speed, a F1 vehicle could drive upside down in a tunnel. 65 liters per 100 kilometers, that's the average fuel consumption of an F1 vehicle. 5 seconds, that is how long it takes for an F1 vehicle to get from 0 to 160 and back down to 0 again. 190 BPM, that is the beats per minute, or basically the heart rate of an F1 driver throughout the race. Which, if you take, the average person has got a standing heart rate of between 70 and 90 beats per minute. So to push it up to 190 beats per minute for an extended period of time is quite extreme, and is something that needs to be monitored. And this talks, once again, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, kind of talks back to the driver well-being and driver health monitoring. And it's not just the heart rate that is being monitored. These drivers have in their gloves, they've got sensors and all sorts of technology which measures the blood pressure, it measures the fluid loss, it measures the oxygen levels, a whole bunch of things to ensure the well-being of the F1 driver. 3,666, that is the average number of gear changes that an F1 vehicle will make during a race, which is a lot of strain and a lot of pressure on the actual power unit of the vehicle. So, I mean, why are all these numbers important? And what does it all mean? This is all data that is coming out of the vehicle. So why is it important? So to explain that is basically the next two numbers. 300 is the number which refers to the number of sensors on an F1 vehicle. In fact, there's over 300 sensors on the F1 vehicle. And all of those sensors talk into a central platform, which the race engineers in the pit wall, as well as the engineers back at the factory, they use that data, they analyze that data to be able to make decisions which impact on the race and impact on the driver. To give an example, 1.5 billion is the number of data points which are transmitted during an F1 race. And all that information is transmitted into a platform. There's all sorts of intelligence in the background, which then enables the engineering crew to make decisions. If we go back to the points that I was talking about in the beginning, if we have a look at your transportation modeling tools, as an example, in F1, they would use something very similar, where they can analyze the rest of the vehicles on the track. They can have a look at things like what is the weight of the fuel in each of the vehicles, what is the tire wear and tear like, what are the speeds the guys are driving, and they can then start predicting at which point driver A will be in a position to overtake driver B, taking all these different factors into account and kind of learning from what is happening. So it's very intense from a data perspective. And then the elephant. I think being in Africa, we have to talk about an elephant. Essentially, the energy required for an F1 vehicle to go from 315 kilometers an hour to 185 kilometers an hour, so that braking, the energy required to get from 315 to 185 is the same amount of energy that would be required for an elephant to jump 10 meters high. But why is this important? What does this have to do with mobility? As I said, F1 takes telemetry to the next level. And most fleets, all telematics companies that are operating in that telematic space would also have a platform which would analyze that data to be able to keep the fleets moving, to contribute towards those different mobility platforms, or those different assets or facets of mobility that we need to take into account. So just to give an example around the platform stuff, I mean, if I look at the Bridgestone Mobility Solutions platform, we currently have 50,000 fleet clients globally. On a daily basis, we're monitoring 3.2 million hours of driving. We're monitoring 130 million kilometers driven. We are monitoring 23 million liters of fuel in the 64 different countries that we operate in. We're also monitoring 60,000 tons of CO2, and we're processing 1 billion vehicle and data GPS positions, which is about 70 billion data probes per quarter. We're getting data from 450 million devices worldwide. We have processed to date 13 trillion data points, 7 billion traces per day, and 280 billion total kilometers driven to date. So that is one start, and this is one of the reasons why Bridgestone bought Webfleet Solutions from what was then TomTom Telematics, or bought TomTom Telematics from TomTom, should I say. Bridgestone is on a drive to become a global leader in mobility solutions. And in order to do that, you need a platform just like the F1 platforms, which is able to take data in not just from the vehicle, but from outside sources. You need to be able to take into account a lot of different data from a lot of different sources, make sense of it so that you enable your workforce, the operational workforce, the technical workforce, the financial workforce, enable all of those people to be able to make the correct decisions as far as the running of the fleet and the running of the business is concerned. So to have a look at some of the factors that you need to take into account, when you're starting to move as a fleet business, starting to move into this total mobility solutions or into total mobility, some of the factors that you need to consider and you need to look at is enabling the mobile workforce. So what are you doing in order to enable the mobile workforce? I spoke about it a little bit earlier, monitoring or being able to ensure that the mobile workforce, when they're not in the vehicle, that they are being productive. Kind of moving more into a digitized world. Are you in a position from a business perspective to move into a digitized world or not? And what I mean by that is things like electronic proof of delivery, things like electronic vehicle checklists, things like electronic workflows. Traditionally, let's take a pre-trip inspection in the transport space. You do a pre-trip inspection, it's paper-based. You will only see the faults in the vehicle when that vehicle comes back, which could be 2, 3, 4, even 2 weeks later. So by enabling the mobile workforce and digitizing things, you then also enable your operational and technical aspects of the fleet. So if your driver is doing a pre-trip inspection, as an example, and there's an issue with the windscreen, because you can transmit that data in real time, your technical staff are aware of what the problem is. They can start ordering new windscreens, they can start ordering windscreen wipers, whatever the case may be. So by enabling the mobile workforce, you're also then you're also able to enable the operational or technical aspects of the business. Operationally, if you're doing EPODs, you don't have to wait for that paper-based POD to get back into the office. It can be transmitted electronically to the office, which means that you can start invoicing immediately, which means that you're then cutting down on the time to invoice, which means you can have an improvement in cash flow. Monitoring tire pressure and tire temperatures in real time. If you're able to in real time understand if a certain axle or a certain tire on a certain axle has got a puncture, and you're able to calculate what the rate of deflation is, you're able to notify the driver that there's an issue. You're also able to notify the operational part of the business that there's an issue. And if the driver can still continue driving for a couple of hours, he'll know that if it's critical, he can pull over immediately, and you can automatically, point number 4, dispatch breakdown services. So you don't really have to wait for the driver to phone somebody for authorization to take place, for breakdown service to go out, et cetera. By moving into this mobility, this total mobility, and having all these different devices connected, talking into a platform, you can start reacting to things a lot quicker. And that talks, the next point, remote monitoring and diagnostics. Understanding if there's problems with the vehicle. If your technical staff understand that there's a possible problem with an aspect of the vehicle, you can react to that a lot quicker. You don't have to wait for it to get back to do an inspection, et cetera, et cetera. You can act on things a lot quicker. Fuel monitoring, understanding your fuel consumption on a particular rig. Is that the correct rig for that load on that particular route based on the fuel consumption? Being able to pick up on fuel theft, sudden increases, sudden decreases in fuel. It all contributes towards total mobility. Your live and historic traffic data when routing and optimizing. If you're able to take into account not just live traffic, but also your historic traffic, it just means that your route optimization is going to be so much better and so much more accurate, because you've got a basis on which to work, and then you take that historic data and overlay it with the real-time traffic data, which means you're basically doing a double optimization. Dashboards relating to usage and time spent on the road. I mean, this is all information that comes out of telemetry devices, where you can start monitoring, is the vehicle that you're using the correct vehicle for that application? Where's my overutilization? Where's my underutilization? Which then starts contributing once again to total mobility. Driver scoring, understanding which drivers do we need to work on from a driver perspective, which of my drivers are abusing the vehicles, which of my drivers have got a high fuel consumption than the other drivers, which of my drivers do we need to send to MasterDrive for some of the driver training. And then the last one, which is the remote medical analytics for drivers, which is something fairly new that we've just recently gotten involved in. And I think it's something that really hasn't been spoken about too much. I do think it'll start getting a lot more coverage now. But if you think about it, and I've actually started in discussions with a Dr. Salepe, who's doing a lot of work around this. And some of the stats that he's picked up is that your truck drivers are 50% more prone to diabetics than the general public. They are 40% more prone to hypertension and 50% more obese than what the general public is. And if you think about it, you've got a rig which is worth 2-3 million rand with a load which could be worth 30 million rand. You need to understand that, is the person climbing behind the wheel of that truck, is he fit to drive the truck? Does he have any underlying medical issues that we need to be aware of? Yes or no? And this, to me, is a big thing that will start contributing towards total mobility into the future. And we're actually looking at integrating our platform with certain wearables which can monitor hypertension, which can monitor things like blood pressure, can monitor things, diabetics, have a look at sugar levels, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, all of these different factors contribute towards total mobility in that fleet space. And once again, if we take it back to the first slide around all the different aspects of total mobility and back into F1, one of the big things behind it, as I said earlier, is the tech portion and the platform. Having a platform which can accept data from various different applications or various different systems is extremely important to facilitate the total mobility. And just a parting message, I think mobility is extremely important for all of us, especially now as we take time off over the festive season, to relax and spend some time with loved ones. I think what we need to do is spare a thought and show some respect for our truck drivers and all the industries that support the transport sector. These guys, do an incredible job, and without them, the December holidays would be very, very different. So yeah, thank you very much, and I think we'll probably be taking questions a little bit later, Eugene.
Justin, thank you very much. Don't disappear. Just before you go, there's a rather interesting question from Craig, and he said, would you guys have been able to measure the blood pressure of Lewis Hamilton when he rear-ended the Red Bull?
Yeah, there were a couple of veins popping in his head.
Justin, thank you very much. We'll take questions a little bit later, but I just want to thank you. I've sat through so many, let's call it telematics type presentations, and in all honesty, many of them have been boring. Yours did justice to it, and I think relating it to Formula One, by the way, those who didn't know what F1 is, it's Formula One, just the uninitiated. So we share that with them. Justin, thank you very much. I do think everybody walked away here with some renewed appreciation for what happens to a Formula One driver. And if Lewis Hamilton happens to win a I'm sure they'll boo him as well. So thanks, Justin. We're now
Pleasure.
going to move through to Craig. Craig is the MD of Accident Specialist. And he's really, oh, by the way, Justin, thank you for that punt there about MasterDrive. We didn't pay him to do that. Craig is going to be talking to the role of skill deficit as a contribution to crashes. As is always, Craig is awesome when he explains it. So I hope you're going to do justice to the subject again, please, Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, Eugene. Thank you, everybody. Just checking. Same issue, just trying to share my screen here. The option on the bottom doesn't seem to be working.
Just check again, because Nishani will have given you screen sharing rights. So just try it again.
Right, this just popped up. There we go. Right, share with sound. Right, just checking that we're sharing screen.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, thank you to MasterDrive. As always, very happy to come and present to you guys and just give a little bit of alternative insight. Thank you for everybody for attending. I see we've got on 100 attendees, which is brilliant. Kate, thank you. Very interesting presentation. That I took quite a bit away from that. And Justin, I think your presentation will feed nicely into this. The data that you guys collect also supports exactly what I'm going to say now in a roundabout way. So just quickly, I've been asked to touch on the subject of skills deficit. Interestingly, when this was posed to me by Eugene, it's something that rang a bell hugely, because I think all of you, and I think everybody in attendance here, will agree that in no uncertain terms, we have a problem on our roads in South Africa. And I'm going to show you that as a matter of absolute fact, we have a skills deficit. And it is the major factor that causes a problem on our roads. So what is skills deficit? So skills deficit can be defined in many ways, but in essence, it's the lack of knowledge from being educated or taught. In other words, you don't know, or you should know, and somebody has never pointed out the obvious to you. The lack of ability from opportunity to practice, and that's a common issue that is raised, especially in the transport industry. Well, I can't improve, I can't do better if I'm not given the opportunity or taught, and the lack of opportunity to correct. So those three are key factors that are indicators or contributors to a skill deficit. So how do we know, or how do we consider when there's a skill deficit? So you will see, I will brief over and show you very quickly. We'll just look at some interesting statistics that I'm sure most of you don't want to look at statistics, but I'll synopsis it for you very quickly in the aspect of South Africa. So we look at statistics of what's going on. Where are the crashes? How do the crashes occur? What causes them? And that tells us certain factors. And it very clearly tells us, as you will see, that there is a skills deficit. Then the second factor that you would use to determine a skills deficit is obviously from evaluation and monitoring. And as we will brief on that, that comes more so from facilities and services like Justin services, looking at and evaluating things, and from services like MasterDrive that can call you in, have a look at what you're doing right and wrong, and can assist you. So let's quickly look at some of the statistics. So what do the stats say? So briefly for you, and this is probably stats most of you would not be aware of or have not seen or had access to. So I'm going to look at our own stats, which is in our private business statistics running from 2000 through to 2021. We're going to look at the eThekwini municipality statistics. For those that you don't know, the eThekwini municipality, that's basically the major Durban metropole area. We have direct access to that, and they are a brilliant source of data. We're going to look at the period for the entire of 2020 and this first half of 2021, which, as you know, is essentially through the lockdown period. So it's a very interesting set of stats to look at. And we're going to look at some data statistics we've been collecting on behalf of Free State and Mpumalanga. So let's quickly get into that. So our statistics, we geolocate and we plot and we look at every single case we look at. And as you can see there, for over 2,000 cases, the major cause is human factor. So if you have any doubt as to what causes crashes, the human factor is the biggest and most direct cause of crashes. Now, what does that speak to? That speaks to a skills deficit. So the human factor is a fairly broad spectrum category, but in general, it's doing silly things like overtaking over a solid line, intentionally skipping robots, intentionally driving at high speed, not stopping when you should stop if you're tired. The human factor is the biggest contributing factor. So we then looked at the eThekwini municipality stats, and believe it or not, just for 2020 and only for the eThekwini region, which is a fairly sizable area, but in 18 months, there was some 83,000 crashes just in the eThekwini area. And of all of those crashes, the major factor by far is the human factor. So there you have two data sets that are already telling us that the human factor, and again, directly related to that, the skills deficit, is the major cause of all the crashes in South Africa. Interestingly, those stats tell us 68% of the fatal crashes are pedestrians. Now that is an interesting fact to keep in your mind as we go forward with this presentation. Likewise, single vehicle crashes, in other words, vehicles crashing into a fixed object or losing control and overturning, accounts for 15% of all of those crashes. So there are your two major crash types that are involved in all of these stats. But again, even in those, that 68% pedestrian and the 15% single vehicle fixed object or single vehicle loss of control, the human factor is the biggest factor. So we very kindly offer our services to the Free State because of various factors. They don't really have a very good data collection system. So we, on literally a daily basis, source the data from various forums and sources, and we geolocate that, as you can see there. That allows us to do certain analysis from the data that comes through to us. And simply for the 11 months of last year, so in essence, starting from about February through to now, in 11 months, only the fatal crashes where people have been killed, there was some 150 crashes. And the major cause from that, we haven't done a detailed analysis, but in a very brief overview analysis, again, the human factor was already close on 70% of all those crashes. So once again, the human factor, even here in the Free State, even for the last 11 months, speaks to skill deficit. We do the same analysis for the Mpumalanga region, a slightly smaller region, but nonetheless just as important. You can see that for the eight months and only collecting the fatal cases, we've had some 71 crashes. Looking at that, the implied factor there is, again, human factor being the major cause. And once again, from that, we lead to the fact that if it is a human factor, almost certainly there's a skills deficit. So what do the stats say? Knowing that the human factor is the major cause, there are essentially 4 avenues of correction or improvement. So driver training standards from grassroots. And here we're talking the license academic test improvements or stricter. In other words, when you go and write your academic test to get your driver's license, then your license practical test improvements either improved or stricter on. So those are 2 key avenues that we feel will improve the skills deficit. Driver training or analysis and improvements post-license. This is a big issue because even where we can't necessarily correct point 1, because as you will see just now, that falls to higher authority. You as an individual or you as someone within a company or entity. You can send your drivers on driver training, driver analysis, and you can improve yourselves. So that falls under the issue of evaluation and monitoring. And you'll remember we said back in the beginning, there's two key issues we look at: statistics that tell us, and evaluation and monitoring. And one of those ways of evaluating and monitoring is either sending yourself or your staff on some sort of evaluative program. For instance, MasterDrive, as among others, can take the driver out and can do an evaluation of where your errors and where your problems are, and then can improve on that. Obviously, we know enforcement needs to be much greater and much stricter. There is definitely enforcement, but across the board, it definitely needs to be far greater and stricter. And then obviously the issue of advertising and education from school levels, teaching our children the correct ways and not the wrong ways, which we will come back to. So these are the inferences from the statistics which feed into the skills deficit. So then let's touch on the second point, which was evaluation and monitoring. So as I've already said, the Provincial Department of Transport feeding down from the National Department of Transport are the custodians of the National Road Traffic Act. In other words, they are the ones that basically monitor, they inspect and maintain all aspects of the driver's license and driver training from an official point of view in terms of if you want to be an authorized driver. Difficult for us to influence that, but though, as we've pointed out, that's one of the issues that needs to be improved on. Beyond this, we can evaluate and monitor through our own introspection of our driving and habits. This is particularly relevant to aggressive driving habits. There are various research papers out, and I think we can all agree that in South Africa, we are quite an aggressive driving nation. We unwittingly perpetuate and pass these bad habits on to others and to children. So, you know, there's that old adage that says, treat others how you would like to be treated. And very often we need to just do some introspection and step back and just say, well, let's just ignore that, or let's do the right thing. So evaluation and monitoring, whether that's an official thing that you do within your company, or whether it's something that you have the mandate or power to suggest that gets done, or whether you do it to yourself. It's an important aspect of considering the skills deficit that we have. Through attending driver evaluation and training, as I've said, so if you can send your staff or yourself on evaluative driver training courses, that will assist you with skills development. So let's take a quick look at some skill deficit examples and just see for yourself. It's quick, it's about 1.5 minutes. Let's have a quick look at this video and just see how many skill deficits you can see within this video.
जितना फिर तुम समझोगे
Edvard Grieg's lyric piece is Opus 12, number 3, and that was the Norwegian melody performed by Leif Ove Ansnes.
A national survey across the 4 major supermarkets in SA showed that Checkers customers are the most satisfied with the prices they're paying. That's probably because we've prevented over 1.8 billion rand in annual food price increases, with savings like 2 packs of 9 per pack house brand 2-ply toilet rolls for $69.99, and Huggies Gold disposable nappies for girls or boys just $169.99 per pack. Valid till Sunday at Gauteng Checkers and Checkers Hypers, excluding Lichtenberg, Mafeking and Free State.
Apartheid security police are being...
Was Ian Brown. 19 minutes to 8 o'clock. Right, traffic news. It seems the most pressing...
Right, I'm sure you'll agree that although some of those are not necessarily major issues, very often though, even those minor issues, relatively minor issues can be quite offensive and can be raise your stress levels quite badly at times. All right, so what are our lessons or our takeaway? So there is an extremely high level of skill deficit. That there is absolutely no question with that. There's various research papers that have shown that, the statistics show that, and I think it's fair to say that almost all of you, or if not every one of you as drivers, will see that on the road. This can be corrected or at least improved on. You yourself need to make a concerted effort to improve. Make the effort to influence others to improve, especially if you are in a company and can influence driver evaluation and training. Educate and influence children correctly. We far too often see children sitting in the car with no seatbelts on. We see parents waving their arms and screaming and swearing out the window with their children in the car. It's a skill deficit at the end of the day. You're passing that on to those children, that it's acceptable to do that. Attend an evaluation and training session. There's many available. If you think you are a brilliant driver, I will tell you very quickly, as a member of the Guild of Motoring Journalists, exactly as Eugene is, they once took a whole lot of the motoring journalists. Now, bear in mind, these are motoring journalists, and they made a lot of the motoring journalists rewrite their driver's license test. I can tell you every single one of the journalists failed. And that is a very clear skills deficit. So if you think you have the skills, I think you may be quite surprised if you go and do an objective evaluation. As you see from the statistics, pedestrian cases are a major issue. So as you're driving, apply your skills and don't suffer from the issue of skills deficit, and preempt what pedestrians are going to do. Otherwise, you're going to be adding to those statistics, either as a driver or if you are a pedestrian. Single vehicle loss of control are to be particularly cautioned and aware of. Don't drive at high speed, slow your speed down in the wet weather. Make sure you have a clear understanding that you are not one of those people that has a skills deficit. Thank you. Thank you, Eugene. Thank you, everybody.
Craig, thank you very much. You know, there was a comment in the chat box about people driving to work. Watching those videos is very stressful. And it is certainly, that's the reality of the world that we live in. Just a quick question to you. We've got a minute or two before we move to the next speaker. I had a question from Trevor. He asked, the skills deficit, when training takes place, can that be attributed to the fact that people get trained in a vehicle that is not the vehicle that they would normally use? So they get trained in, let's say, a front-wheel drive vehicle, and they normally drive in a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Your comments?
It's a bit of a catch-22 situation, yes and no, because that's one of the things that, and I don't want to speak out of turn, you're probably the better person to answer that than I am. As a driver, you should adapt to the situation, and you should adapt to the vehicle that you're driving in. But yes, it can have an influence, whether it's front wheel drive or rear wheel drive. But in essence, you as a driver should adapt, and you should be adaptable all the time. That is a skill that you should learn to do. And it's the exact same trait that you should have in life. Unfortunately, we as humans generally don't like change, but once we just accept the change and go with it and understand it, it makes it easier.
Craig, thank you very much. I will give my response. One of the reasons why we're not necessarily affiliated to one particular brand is because we believe that you should be trained in the vehicle that you use. Take, for example, a person driving a bakkie. You know, they carry this big load at the back, and which the handling characteristics are so different to a front-wheel drive vehicle that they're operating. But I agree with you, if it is our desire to be a better driver and the intention is to improve, we should have that desire and aspire to be better than what we were. So thank you very much, Craig. As is always the case, you bring some real valuable information. And I trust that as we go away during the festive season, our viewers will take cognizance of the fact that you mentioned a figure of 73% or thereabouts. Internationally, they talk about 90 to 95% of crashes as a result of human behavior. And it's something we should remember. And you're encouraging their thought is, let's drive nice. And if we drive nice, it's contagious. So thank you very much, Craig. Just before we introduce our next speaker, has anyone ever heard of the concept of risk homeostasis? It's basically that we will, as drivers or as individuals, trade one set of negative things in exchange for the benefits that we could get out of it. And I'll give you an example. We know it's dangerous to drive with cell phones or use cell phones. But the fact is we still do because we believe there's benefits to be had out of it. And that is to enhance communication, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole subject, we'll talk to you one day about that. And that brings into analysis what the difference is between risk ignorance and risk arrogance. Now, if you were unaware of the fact that what causes a crash and having looked at those videos and you go ahead and you drive, that's ignorance. If, however, you are aware of the fact that overspeeding and other things can contribute toward crashes, and you still continue to do so, well, that's risk arrogance. So now we are going to move into our next presentation. We're very well aware of the fact that criminals operate around the year. We leave our homes in December to track to the coast or wherever, and therefore we're exposed. Our next speaker is Wahl Bartmann, who's the CEO of the Fidelity Group. Let's talk about security services in general, but he's going to talk to some specific things about what you and I, as homeowners, leaving our homes can do to protect our assets. Wahl, over to you.
Eugene, can you please take another question for Craig?
Okay.
Mr. Barton is logging on still.
Okay. All right. Just a quick one while we're talking about the skills deficit then. When we have a look at a skills deficit, you know, the sad reality is we've found when we assess drivers to our standard, admittedly our standard is a pretty high one, roughly 70% of drivers would fail that evaluation. Now, that's a physical evaluation, talking their ability to engage with the vehicle controls. There is another interesting development, and it's been run by Crimnals University in the UK, and it talks about a psychometric risk assessment of a driver. And this really what it is speaking to is that the driver's appetite for risk. Now, if we could measure that, it could surely indicate whether a driver is well disposed toward a particular job, spending many hours behind the wheel, or if short temper, it was mentioned by Craig, aggressive driving. And please, and I think that we as adults who have the responsibility of educating our younger members of the family and those who drive with us, if we're responding to the actions of other drivers by comments, expletives that are used, or gestures, certainly we're not encouraging a spirit of caring and sharing on our roads today. And you will have noticed that you put a person behind the wheel of a motor car, suddenly they develop another persona and they do things that they wouldn't under normal circumstances do. And for those who are fleet owners and who operate fleets as companies, here's an opportunity to engage differently and ensure that they respond in an appropriate way. Please, if there's one message that I'd really like you to take away from here, is the fact that during lockdown, many people became more engaged with the use of their cell phone. They haven't lost that habit, and they now carried it over into their driving. And as a result, and I think we've got one of our guests today who will attest to the fact that they caught some of their staff members Zooming while driving. It's not on. So, Nishani, is Wahl ready to talk to us?
Not as yet, Eugene.
Okay. Can I just share with you some information, and this also relates to a skills deficit. If you use a mobile device while engaging driving, our honest opinion is that you should speak to the task or stick to the task that you embraced with at that time, and that is driving. Now, here's some information that you'd like to maybe remember and share. Many people are of the opinion that it's the taking off of the hands off the wheel in order for you to dial the phone, possibly taking your eyes off the road in order to look at what number you're dialing. So there's a vision deficit and a control deficit. It's not really those two things that contribute toward the high rate of crashes. It's the fact that the human brain cannot cognitively engage in two equally important tasks simultaneously. It will do one or the other. And I'll give you an example. Let's assume you're on the road and your boss is calling you, and you've left work early to go and play golf, and you shouldn't have, and you now take his phone call. You will be very conscious of the fact that he's your boss, and that if you get caught out, you are going to be severely disciplined. So is your attention focused on driving then? Clearly not. Getting back to the point about vision deficit, have a look and see that if you take the eyes, if you're dialing or taking your eyes off the road, that probably lasts for about 2 seconds. Traveling at 120 kilometers an hour, you're traveling at 33 meters a second. So if you took your eyes off the road, you'd be talking about 66 close to 70 meters a second. But the real distraction lasts up to 5.2 seconds, way beyond the length of a rugby field. You'd try that one day. Not that I'm suggesting you do it as a passenger, and you'll be horribly shocked to find out what you could or would have done, blissfully unaware of the consequences. So now let's move through to Wahl's presentation. Are we there, Nishani, or should we go ahead with Janine?
We actually have Mr. Wahl Bartmann that has already joined us, Eugene. We can hand over.
Okay. So we're handing over to Wahl Bartmann, as the CEO of Fidelity. Thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate the fact that you can share some of your insights with regard to what we should be doing. Wahl?
Good morning, everybody. Just want to put up my camera quickly, sorry.
Wahl, you've got time, so don't stress, eh? We know you've got all the time in the world, all right?
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and to be part of these the presentation. And you know, we've had a briefing exactly what you require from us on the security side. So thank you very much. Basically, you know, if we look at December and we look at the way forward, what we're going to do, how we're going to manage the risk, and looking at the intrusion systems and the alarm systems. And I think looking at the risk currently in South Africa, we have seen that, you know, people going away on leave, and what is those problems and what we can expect from criminals, as we can say, coming up in the festive season. It's not only that we've got a problem on the criminal side, but I think we also have a huge challenge currently with the power cuts and the different stages that are there, as well as the weather. I think the weather also has a huge impact on your technology that's being deployed there. And I think for people going away on holiday, it's very important to make sure that, you know, from a security side, that your system has been checked. And please don't leave it till the 14th until you go away, or the 15th, because there's a lot of work to be done. We have seen that crime is escalating on house robberies. It's been huge, and also we've seen it in the businesses that is happening. And I went back and looked at the trends, and you will see that as the businesses are closing from the 15th onward, there's an increase of about 4 to 5% on our client base, that there's more attempts, more break-ins, and more incidences happening. And then also early in January, on the 4th, also we can see an increase in these incidents that are happening. So to be prepared, I think it's important to make sure that should you have an alarm system, to check it and make sure that it's functional and it's working. We know with load shedding, the problem there is that a lot of your systems are linked to or operating on a cell phone network. That's how you get your signals across, and we know that the towers are going down. The problem with that is that your battery life of your system, I think if it happens now, it's good. It would last for a few hours, but after a year or so, it doesn't cope. And I think the problem is that your amount of alarms that are coming through is escalating. It has an impact on the response times. It has an impact on monitoring those. Make sure that your system is operational. You do the check and you make sure that it is 100%. If you look at the precautionary measures that could be taken, definitely there's quite a few that we recommend. So firstly is to make sure that the system is up and running. Secondly, to make sure that, a lot of people go away, and we all do it. We lock up everything, so we make it so difficult for the response officer to entry. Remember, guys are not going through the front door when they break in. They go through the roof. They go through sections where it's much easier for them to get through. So we need to make sure that if there is an incident, that the contact person is available. We've seen it. We've experienced it every day, that you get phoned, the contact number is not right, it's not answering, and it is a problem. So firstly, if it is a false alarm, I think we do a response to that, which is a cost. Not only that, but it also delays all the other responses. So definitely the contact person needs to be available. And if you're not available, have the right person there. The second thing is also to have the key holder available. You respond, there's a big wall or a fence around, it's electrified. We expect the security officer to check and go through. There is technology out there that could be used so that you can open up the gate remotely, etc. So a lot of it is there, and to monitor it. If there's false alarms, get your alarm serviced before you go, and make sure that it's functional. The other thing as well, any suspicious people or hanging around in the area, etc. There's a lot of technology out there on the VumaCam and other cameras that we monitor in our control center, so we can pick up suspicious vehicles. You can flag them with your current service provider so that they know that there is a problem. It has been a debate. A lot of people are saying, do I say to my service provider, I'm going away, or I'm not going to be there because there might be internal involvement? Well, criminals are well prepared. If we think that they don't know, they observe, they check, they're there. So please make sure that you take the necessary precautions and measures to do. My view is inform your company to say to them that they need to do special patrols, they need to check, make sure that the numbers are available so that they can contact you if there's an activation. Thirdly, in the event of an emergency, how do they get into your property? It is important to make sure that there is somebody that either could open up or allow them in. If you have a remote, let them seal it in a tamper-evident bag. The reaction company, they can keep it with them, and should they respond, they can go in and view and see exactly what's happening. Security starts from the outside. We know that the fence, your lights, all of that. There's a lot of new systems in the market that you can use, whether it's visual, where we can view. You can view it on your phone. You can see exactly what's happening. A person in the control room can activate. they can look. So
we seem to have lost Wahl for a
for
moment.
the December period and domestic as well as the business, important that you make sure. Hello.
Go ahead, Wahl. We just lost you for a moment, but please go ahead.
Hello. Hello.
Go ahead, Wahl. We just lost you for a moment, but please proceed. Wahl, you can go ahead. Wahl, gaan maar voort, hoor. Sorry about that interruption. Let's just see if we can pick up on Wahl again. There we are, Wahl. We lost you for a moment. Please go ahead, carry on.
Thank you. There I'm back again. So
You left where you said you were
think-
going to donate R1 million to us or something, I think.
I think it was about 2.5 million.
Okay, sorry, my hearing is gone. Thanks, Wahl. Please go ahead.
No, I wish. I think that, you know, also talking about some of the is that thing happens. We've seen COVID now that people are at home, and while they're at home, remember that the systems are not set, the alarms are not set, the beams are not set, and while you're busy, your system's not armed. The next minute you'll see the guys are in the house, etc. So it is important that you can set up certain sections of your system to be active, and it's important that we do that so that you can manage it. We've seen due to the lockdown, incidents during the day increased while people are at home. They're not that alert. You know, the doors are open, everything is open. So it is important to make sure during the day as well that you take care of that. And also do the basic training, because it's important that if she's got a to follow through on it, if you can see exactly if the people are using, if they do have a vehicle, can you take the registration number? All of that is available. So I think basically, as I said, there are quite a few systems that are available. There are a system available now, they call it Secure Gate, where you can, if you're not there, or you can open up your gate for the security company if you're not at home to visit, to check and see that your site is safe. You've got Secure Home that can actually monitor your system, and then you've got Secure Connect, which is a system that you can use to view and see exactly what's happening in the house. And a lot of the current equipment that's in place could be used or upgraded to support you in that. To continue, some of the basic tips that I've got. Also, a lot of the, you know, it's difficult. You've got trees covering certain areas, your fence as touching some branches, etc. So the activations, there are too many activations, and I think what happens then that the security company believes that it's a false alarm, and the day that it's a real alarm, it is a problem. So definitely we need to look at make sure that the fence and everything is working. We all have neighbors. We know that all of them are not going away. So for ask them to have a look if there's anything happening at your house, etc., to assist, or to tap, or also phone. Do they know who your service provider is, etc. Of course, make sure that everything is locked.
Well, we've lost a lot. Can I suggest you kill your video? Kill your video so that we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, basically, I think that looking at the crime stats, and as I said, at businesses, we know from the 16th there is an increase. We need to look at that. Load shedding, the problem. Make sure that your battery gets serviced if it's not up to scratch. Make sure that or when that comes in from Eskom, it's chaos in the armed response business, because the amount of signals that are coming through, what happens is the system basically shuts down, the battery is gone, and for every one signal we'll probably receive 2 or 3 coming through, because there would be some open zones that wouldn't have activated, and that creates a problem. Just to give you an indication in the lens to make last 3 months we've
Well, we've lost you again. And I'm not sure if you're in a position to pick up again. Okay, we apologize profusely. Clearly, there's a data issue or a signal issue from Wahl's side, and we apologize profusely. There's so much information, I'm sure that we would have benefited. What we will do is ask if we can get a summary of those points, and we'll happily share it with all our viewers. Let's now get ready to move through to our next presentation. Janine, who has worked with us in the past, she's given some incredible insight, and the subject that she's going to be talking to is coping mechanisms that build up. How can we deal with the stress, and what are the recommendations? So we're going to ask you, Janine, if you would please take the podium and share with us.
Morning, afternoon, morning, sorry. Is my camera on?
Yes, you go for it.
Okay. So I've been asked to speak today on the COVID isolation, social anxiety effects of a long year, nearly 2 years of isolation, lockdowns, etc., on the interview and how it affects the festive season. So the first thing I'd like to say is that there's a direct link between the symptoms of anxiety and depression and the problem. People who are depressed and anxious display this at work. They feel unheard. Sometimes they feel non-empathized with, and then they become more depressed and anxious. And that's what you're looking at, this vicious circle. There's also something called performance anxiety, which we've all heard about, but we're talking about work here. And holding onto your job can lead to guilt if you take time off, as we all know. Sorry, I just want to put my share screen with my headings here, if you can see it. Am I sharing screen? These are just the points that I'll be going. Thank you. These are just the points that I'll be going through today. Also, you find that there's financial stress that's impacting on the holidays. We're now expected to go and have big parties and buy gifts for everyone. A lot of people lost their jobs during COVID, which is immensely stressful. There's the hesitancy to go and get medicated. There's stigma, there's fear of side effects, and a lot of lack of knowledge. So what happens is that people who are struggling at the end of the year with anxiety or depression, or even just the normal stress that's come with all this COVID, keep quiet. Anxious and depressed people often use silence, they use withdrawal, and we don't know how much anxiety the people around us are experiencing. So the best thing to do is listen carefully to the people around them and offer help. People often don't know how the people around us are struggling. And also, you don't know that we're all in the same boat. Often you'll find that people are sharing your feelings. So another thing that anxiety and depression lead to during a stressful year like this is the automatic helping behavior that you've noticed in the people who go, they're going to take all the shifts that people with COVID can't do. They're going to help the people around them. They're desperately going to try and hang on to their jobs. And that's really harmful, actually, to your mental health, because you end up helping everyone around you. It becomes expected of you, and there you have your problem. So travel is also, and this is specific to the end of the year, not just, you know, during your daily work life, unless you travel like your guys obviously do, you drive a lot during the week. Travel is very stressful for run-of-the-mill people like me who aren't getting all the driving training and all that care that your employees receive. So long drives, and you know that everyone out there could have COVID, you know that the police are going to be stopping people, you know there's going to be limits to where you can go. Travel is very, very stressful. Keep an eye out for these symptoms of mental illness. And it's the three biggies are always going to be behavior, emotion, and sleep patterns. You're going to see changes in the people around you or in yourself in behavior, emotion, sleep patterns, and appetites. If you've got kids or teenagers, look for a lot of crying, isolation, not wanting to go to school, not wanting to see their friends. That's really not good in kids. And suicidal thoughts, which leads me to my next very unpleasant topic, and that's the rise of suicide at the end of the year. It's normal during normal years. Christmas time, people are lonely and you see happy families all around you. Problem now is that we've had COVID, we've had isolation, we haven't been able to bounce it off the people around us. We haven't been able to see the people around us, and we can't bounce it off anyone. And also, you know, we're worried to talk to people about it because we feel like everybody's got their problems to deal with. So suicide does go up, unfortunately. They have had studies by the SA Journal of Psychology. They've said that 33% of South Africans experienced depression during the first lockdown. I want you to think about that for a minute. That's a third of the population, and there were a lot of people who weren't tested. A lot of people who had chronic depression and anxiety couldn't see their psychiatrists and psychologists because they'd lost their jobs, which meant that they had to find free counseling. And I volunteered at a counseling center where people were coming to us with long-term issues that you can't deal with at a short-term counseling venue. People weren't taking their meds because they couldn't afford them. And here comes Christmas. Everyone around you looks like they're having a wonderful time, and you think you're the only one who's not, and you start thinking about suicide. So that leads me to my next point around bereavement. we're already struggling with bereavement, and then comes suicide. You might have lost people due to COVID. You might have lost family members due to the normal, old age. Car accidents still happen. We've spoken about that. Unfortunately, we still know people who get cancer in this awful, awful time of COVID. I know this is a very depressing subject. So we're dealing with bereavement. It might be the first year that you've been without someone you love. And if you don't take the time to deal with your bereavement, the normal, 5 stages, denial, anger, and then if somebody commits suicide, you have guilt to deal with as well. And often with other bereavement, you also find there's a lot of guilt. And I find guilt comes with most mental health issues. You feel like you've done something wrong. You feel like you could have done better. You could have been more responsible for the person. You could have help them more, or you could have prevented this happening. Remember that bereavement survivors, it's just like the victim of a trauma. You were acting with the information you had at the time, and you did your best, and you're not thinking clearly. So what you should do is reach out immediately. Tell someone that you feel this way. And if you can't speak to people because you're too traumatized or too grief-stricken, write your thoughts down, record them, and visit them later when you've had some help. Groups here are really, really helpful when you're dealing with bereavement, especially at the end of the year. And that's going to take me to my coping strategies. If you'll just stand by for 1 second while I figure out how this works. Here we go. Right, coping strategies. Call someone. I'm going to put some numbers up just now. Call someone. We are unshockable, okay? I have heard stuff in my practice that will make your hair curl. You can't shock us. You can't upset us. That's what we are there for. You're not stupid. You're not crazy. You are normal. You are struggling just like every other human being is struggling. You have a limit just like every other human being has a limit. Ask for help rather than wasting your life. Rights and responsibilities in the workplace. We've obviously touched on that earlier, where you talk about right to repair. You also have right to repair yourself. When you are seeing a therapist or a counselor, you have the right to share or not share with your manager, but you'd be amazed at how even the people who look like have got it all together will understand you. They will know, and they might be dealing with the same thing. In my freelance work in the studio, I like to drop the words my therapist says into the conversation every now and then and watch people go, oh, okay, I've just got to go for a walk or thing. And then 5 minutes later, someone will come and say, do you know a good therapist? So people are struggling. Tell someone. And the rights I want to talk about in the workplace, or just mention briefly, you have the right to leave, to go on a holiday, to refresh yourself. Don't feel guilty or like you're going to lose your job if you take leave. If you do, that's not right. And also, if you like to think of yourself as someone who produces something for your company, think of the amazing work you'll do after you've had a good break. You will be a better asset to your company if you take your exhausted, unhappy, stressed out self somewhere to do something that you want to do. And that's where we're going to go identifying anxiety triggers and avoid them. Don't do stuff you don't want to do during this holiday. You are probably exhausted already. You don't have to cook turkey for 40 people. A, we're worried about COVID, but B, if it stresses you out, don't do it. This is a pleasant events diary. Go find one, download it on the internet, and it's very, very basic. Write down the stuff that you enjoy, that you feel makes you happy. You actually don't know what's at your disposal. People don't know the amazing resources that they have inside. So we can look at things like gardening, helping, volunteering, find areas of your life which give pleasure. Watch movies, watch TV, read a book, do the things you want to do. Even if you just find sitting in the garden is going to make you feel better, go do it. Don't offer excuses. Don't feel guilty. This is what you need. See the things that make you stressed out and do something about it, and tell people that you are doing something about it, and don't feel bad. You owe it to yourself. You've given enough this year. Then there is something that I like to called self-talk. Self-talk is the inner voice. Stop that. Self-talk is the inner voice that runs in your head all day. It comes from your family, it comes from your upbringing, it comes from your boss, it comes from your best friend. You know, it's the conscious and unconscious thing that makes you look at someone and go, "Ooh, don't wear that dress again." You know, it's like, that looks really unsafe. We watched those videos of the cars and we went, "Oh, that looks unsafe." We got that from somewhere. We have assimilated all the voices of our past and our upbringing, and often, because we are prone to negativity when we're unhappy and stressed, those voices are going, "I can't do anything right. I'm going to lose my job. They gave me the day off today because they're talking about me and they want to fire me. My friends haven't phoned me because they don't like me anymore. My family is ostracizing me this year because I'm difficult at family gatherings." Instead of that, start telling yourself, "I'm awesome. I've hung on to my job this year." Work on that self-talk, work on your neuroplasticity, and tell yourself the same thing every day. It sounds like a mantra, but it's just correcting the way you speak to yourself. It's reframing. It's, if you think you're difficult, rather tell yourself you're a striver, you're a driver, you're somebody who does things well. If you think you're picky, rather say you've got standards. Think about that all the time. Be mindful of the voice in your head and use reality checks to see. Sorry, and I'll share the screen again so you guys have got the numbers ish. Okay, and use reality checks. These are your reality checks. These numbers are people that you can call, also people that are dealing with this every day, and they know what you're going through. If they're busy, call again. And then I'm here too.
Janine, your screen is not shared.
Sorry. Why is it not sharing? Oh, no.
It's depressed, possibly.
It's depressed. Can you see that now? There you go. That's me. Have you seen? Did you see the other helpful numbers?
No, we didn't see those numbers.
There you go. There you go. Okay. So these are numbers you need. Obviously, you can look any of these up. They've all got websites. So they will be online all the way through Christmas, obviously, including me. And you need to know that these people are used to this. This is what they do. So like I said earlier, they're not going to think there's anything wrong with you. While I've got that up there, I just want to share a couple of handy hints that I looked up about financial stress. This is something you can look up online. It's not very psychological, but it is a bit helpful. When you are psychologically and financially stressed at the same time, you don't think clearly. And sometimes you think the Joneses next door are going to buy awesome gifts. I'm going to look like a stupid person if I don't, but you're not. So start with your list. Make it, stick to it. Don't go into debt. Skip people that you would buy for some years and explain to them. I promise you'll find out that everyone's in the same boat. Don't get into debt this Christmas. And think about the gifts we were talking about earlier. Give people shortbread, cookies, knit them beanies, get the kids to make decorations and cards, buy online, have it delivered directly to them, send it in advance. If it doesn't arrive on Christmas Day, who cares? You'll save money. And just make sure that you're doing something that makes you feel good. I know that a lot of people donate. You can donate on behalf of someone, and that will also lift your spirits a little bit this Christmas time. So thank you very much. That's it for me. I'd just like to leave you with the thought that you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not crazy. And we have all been in the same boat for the last 2 years. So just take it easy on yourself. Thank you.
Janine, thank you for those empowering thoughts. I'm sure that our audience will appreciate it. Don't disappear. I need to ask you a question. And thank you for the engaging and the smile. It certainly makes all the difference to all of us. A quick one. Oh, yeah, there's a compliment to you. It says you're amazing. I needed to hear this. So it's a fantastic question from somebody. What are the 3 main causes for stress that you've identified?
Me. Okay. Firstly, I would say work. So work and finance go together, because if you lose your job. Secondly, at this time, illness and bereavement. I'm looking more specifically at this year. So I would say bereavement, loss, and often the person who lost, you know, that ties in with the breadwinner. So that goes back to, I've got to hang on to my job. I've lost the breadwinner. I'm dealing with this bereavement. And then social interaction at this time. Social interaction and non-interaction. Isolation is immensely stressful. So until everybody started realizing we could get in touch on Zoom, one of my clients had the most awesome idea. She got in touch. They formed a mini social group online with her fellow master students from years ago. They used to have a study group, and they reformed the group as a catch-up group. And they get together every month because they know they're like-minded, they know they understand each other, and check on each other's lives, you know. So isolation, I would say, is huge. It's especially for the kids. It's terrible. This is when they're supposed to be making friends, getting into trouble, you know what I mean, going out late at night, being naughty, and they're stuck homeschooling in the house with their parents. So there have been, I mean, it's not a joke. There has been a lot of mental issues with that, and the suicide rate is going up.
Janine, thank you very much. As always, I'm sure everybody, and you've made your details available. So thank you again. Please stay on, because we'd love to award some prizes just now. If I can just ask Craig to open his camera for a moment. Question for you, Craig. Do you find that bad road design is more and more becoming a contributing factor in crashes? If you're there, Craig, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, Eugene. Apologies. Yeah, definitely. We actually are busy at the moment. We're, interestingly enough, related motorcycle cases. We have 4 motorcycle cases at the moment that are all directly attributed to, let's be blunt and say, potholes. We're actually busy with an actual, what we call a naturalistic study, where we're actually taking a motorcycle on a test rig and doing some of that. But yes, road condition is definitely an increasing factor, no question of it.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. But of course, it doesn't excuse people for not being aware of what they're doing. It doesn't excuse for drinking and driving or drinking and riding. So let's not give those as reasons why we had a crash. So thank you very much, Craig. Kate, can we get you back? I've got 3 interesting questions for you. What happens if a vehicle is involved in an accident during the warranty period? Who can repair it?
So that's a good question. If the consumer is insured, the vehicle must be referred by the consumer's insurer to a manufacturer-approved repairer to ensure that the integrity of the consumer's warranty is protected, while the accident-related repairs are being attended to. However, if the consumer is not insured, it's up to the consumer which service provider they choose. Okay, thank you. Here's another one for you. RMI plays an important role in monitoring and making sure that standards are adhered to. Question is, do workshops need to be registered with RMI to service warranty vehicles in terms of the right to repair now? So in order to make use of the guidelines, independent service providers don't actually need to be registered with anyone. They don't register with us, they don't register with RMI or MIWA or anyone, but using an RMI accredited workshop is quite a good way of checking that they are a reputable establishment. Okay, thanks. And yeah, I've got a question. I would assume that it automatically answered, but let me praise in any case. What about the motorbike industry? You have motorbikes costing, you know, $250,000 and more. They're also covered. They're vehicles. So they're classified as vehicle in terms of the guidelines. Okay, so the viewer who posed that, he's a motorbike rider, I know. So that's good news for him. Guys, thank you very much for that. We're now going to go into our prize giving. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And we trust that we will be seeing more of you in the new year, and it will be under less stressful conditions, Janine. So thank you very much. So prizes, we have winners for our Auto Gymkhana. I'm just going to read them out. Our team will contact you. Kumo Ganyani, Letiwe Machali, Neliswe Makabela,
and Tony Dos Rias. So you're the winners of the Auto Gymkhana experiences. We're giving away 2 Take-A-Lot vouchers. Roy Davids, you're the recipient of 1. And Mashudu Kasimimro, you're also a recipient of a 250 Rand gift voucher from Take-A-Lot. There is a total of 5 defensive driving courses going away. Henry Jonker, Gerhardus Duran, Ronnie Elliot, and here's the other 2, Gavin Shand and Charlotte Marais. So congratulations, the team will contact you over there. 5 books courtesy of Hollow, co-written by Fleetwatch. Saine Makwaba, Sharon Somerset, Tia Lindecure, Andre Visser, and John Taylor. And then I'm going to read verbatim. There was a prize that's been carried over through 3 colloquiums. Sorry, no, the first one, 3 body stress release sessions for the value of 1,300 Rand. The team, you have to mail Sam at MasterDrive with the subject line body stress release and motivate why you should be the winner of it. And then, of course, the prize that we've been carried over to a value of 34,100. It's an international diploma in logistics and transport. You need to register your interest by sending an email to, and the team can supply it to you as well, vaughan@ce-learn.com. And the winner will be announced at the next colloquium, which is on the 17th of February in 2022. So, and there was one final prize from Fidelity. If you want to sign up, 36-month contract with them, you get 3 months free, and we will also supply you with the details over there. And then if you really behave yourself, we'll invite you to our next colloquium. So thank you very much. Just so that you're aware of the fact, it was also running on YouTube. We had 250 odd registrations. So we were well over the 200. So if you looked at the 90 odd that you saw on this screen, it wasn't that there weren't many more in attendance. And as indicated previously, we will be making it available, a link. And I'm sorry about the loss of the file, but what we will do is get them to document those points, and then we'll share it. You can again request it from the team. So please don't forget what we do, all made possible by virtue of MasterDrive. Craig mentioned what we do. We do driver training. And so please, if you have any needs, amongst a host of other activities, but above all, we would like to see you get to your destination safe during the vacation period. Don't drink and drive. Don't use your cell phone while driving. And please drive nice. It's contagious. Thank you again to everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And Shani will now pay the credits. So thank you.
Adios.
Yeah. Nishani, are you playing?
Watch and create short videos on the YouTube app. Introducing the shorter side of YouTube.